Elias stood at the edge of the glass-walled boardroom, looking out over a city he had helped shape, yet a city that did not know his name. For 15 years, he had been the silent engine behind Vanguard Heights, a prestigious architectural firm where power was measured by the length of the mahogany table and the sharpness of one's suit. Elias, now a senior architect, had spent his life chasing a ghost. His father, a titan of industry who never found a moment to praise his son's sketches, had left a void that Elias tried to fill with blueprints and structural steel. He believed that if he built something grand enough, the world, and perhaps the memory of his father, would finally grant him the validation he craved. The air in the office was thick with the scent of expensive cologne and corporate desperation. Elias clutched his leather portfolio, his fingers tracing the embossed logo of the firm. Today was supposed to be the culmination of his career. He had spent the last 3 years pouring his soul into a revolutionary eco-friendly skyscraper, a design that merged nature with urban density in a way never seen before. It was his magnum opus, the project that Julian, the CEO and Elias's longtime mentor, promised would finally make him a partner. Julian had been the closest thing Elias had to a father figure, a man who spoke of loyalty and legacy with the silver-tongued grace of a king. As the global press conference began, the cameras flashed like 1,000 tiny suns. Elias sat in the front row, his heart hammering against his ribs. This was it. Julian took the podium, his smile radiant under the spotlight. He began to speak about the vision behind the skyscraper, the innovation and the future of Vanguard Heights. But as the presentation reached the credits, Elias felt a sudden, sickening chill. Julian gestured toward the screen, presenting the design as his own personal triumph. When a reporter asked about the architectural lead, Julian's voice didn't even waver. He referred to Elias as a mere technical assistant who helped with the logistics, dismissing 15 years of brilliance as clerical support. The world seemed to tilt. The applause was a deafening roar that felt like a physical assault. Elias sat frozen, his face a mask of professional composure while his insides turned to ice. He realized then that his loyalty hadn't been a virtue in Julian's eyes. It was a commodity to be exploited. The realization was a slow, agonizing burn. He wasn't a partner in waiting, he was a tool that had served its purpose. Seeking an escape from the suffocating congratulations being heaped upon Julian, Elias retreated to a side hallway. The thick carpets muffled his footsteps as he approached the CEO's private office. Through the cracked door, he heard a familiar laugh. It was Julian speaking to one of the board members. Julian's voice was different here, cruel and mocking. He laughed about Elias's desperate need to please, calling him a loyal dog who would work for scraps as long as you patted his head. He admitted he never had any intention of making Elias a partner, because a partner requires respect, and you don't respect the help. Before we continue, subscribe to the channel and tell us in the comments where you are watching from. Elias backed away, the words echoing in his mind like a death knell. The mahogany table he had spent a decade and a half trying to reach was a mirage. Just then, his phone vibrated in his pocket. It was an encrypted message from Marcus, a former rival who had been ousted by Julian years ago. Marcus had always been a predator, but today his message offered a dark allure. It claimed to have evidence that could dismantle Julian's reputation, but it required Elias to do the unthinkable, sabotage the very skyscraper he had spent years designing before he walked away. The choice was simple: fight back. Elias stared at the glowing screen of his phone, the message from Marcus pulsing like a heartbeat in the dark room. The temptation to burn the house down was a wildfire in his veins. To watch Julian's reputation crumble under the weight of a structural failure, one that Elias could easily orchestrate by leaking flawed foundation calculations, felt like a poetic justice, But as he looked at the intricate blueprints of the skyscraper, he saw more than just steel and glass. He saw his own sweat, his late nights, and the purest part of his ambition. To sabotage the work was to murder his own legacy. He realized that while Julian had stolen the credit, he could never steal the craft. Integrity was a heavy coat to wear in a cold world, but it was the only thing keeping him warm. He deleted the message, choosing a path that was harder but cleaner. The celebratory dinner that evening was a masterclass in choreographed cruelty. The venue was an opulent restaurant where the elite of the architectural world gathered to toast to Julian's vision. Elias arrived late, but the seating chart had been designed to inflict maximum damage. He was placed at the very end of the long mahogany table, squeezed between a junior accountant and a decorative plant. At the head of the table sat Julian, flanked by his nephew, a young man whose only contribution to architecture was his last name. The nephew sat in the place of honor that Elias had earned through 15 years of sacrifice. Julian raised a glass, his eyes briefly meeting Elias's with a look of predatory triumph. The laughter around the table sounded like shattering glass. Elias didn't touch his wine. The taste of betrayal was already bitter enough. When he finally returned home, the silence of his apartment felt like a sanctuary. Elena was waiting for him, her eyes reflecting the pain she knew he was carrying. She didn't offer empty platitudes. Instead, she took his hands and looked at the calluses earned from years of drafting. She told him that a king without a crown is still a king, but a slave in a palace is still a slave. She reminded him that his value was intrinsic, not something granted by a man who used people like scaffolding. Her words were the anchor he needed as the storm of self-doubt threatened to pull him under. He wasn't losing a career, he was reclaiming his worth and his identity. The next morning, Elias walked into Julian's office, demanding an explanation. Julian didn't look up from his desk at first. When he finally did, his face was a mask of paternal disappointment. He claimed the public snub was a test, a trial to see if Elias possessed the humility required for leadership. He told Elias that he wasn't ready for the spotlight, suggesting his ego was too fragile for the heavy burden of power. It was a classic piece of gaslighting, a way to make Elias feel guilty for his own mistreatment. Julian's voice was smooth as oil, suggesting that if Elias just stayed quiet and worked harder, perhaps in another 5 years, things would change. Late that night, Elias drove to the construction site. The skeletal frame of the skyscraper rose into the moonlight like a giant cage. He walked through the dusty floors, feeling the cold wind whistle through the gaps. He realized he had built a monument for people who didn't even know his middle name. But as he examined the recent structural shipments, he noticed something horrifying. The materials didn't match his specifications. They were using low-grade alloys to save costs. He rushed to the foreman's trailer and found the logs. There, in bold black ink, was his own signature, forged with terrifying precision. They were risking lives to pad their profit margins, and they were using him as the fall man. The weight of the discovery was crushing. Staying at the table wasn't just an insult to his dignity, it was a threat to his soul. He could no longer be a silent witness to a tragedy. As the sun rose on the day of the final contract signing, Elias sat at his desk, the weight of the choice heavy in his hands. He prepared 2 folders. One contained the documents that secured his future at the firm, and the other contained the truth that would burn the bridge forever. The boardroom at Vanguard Heights smelled of expensive leather and stale ambition. Sunlight streaked through the windows, illuminating dust motes dancing over the massive mahogany table. Julian sat at the head, his silver hair perfectly coiffed, a signature fountain pen resting beside the final legal documents. These papers were the final trap. By signing, Elias would officially endorse the substandard materials and surrender his intellectual property rights to the firm. Julian slid the heavy folder across the polished wood, his smile a thin line of practiced warmth. He spoke of legacy and the bright future they would share, but his eyes remained cold, calculating the profit margins of his latest betrayal. The board members watched in silence, their faces masks of indifference, waiting for the subordinate to perform his final act of submission. Elias looked down at the heavy gold watch on his wrist, the one his father had given him, a symbol of a lifetime spent chasing the approval of men who would never truly see his worth. Slowly he stood up. He didn't feel the familiar tremor of anxiety that had haunted his career for 15 years. Instead, a terrifyingly calm clarity washed over his mind. He looked Julian directly in the eye, ignoring the folder entirely. He told the room that for a long time he believed his identity was tied to his seat at this mahogany table. He admitted he had tolerated the slights and the stolen credit because he feared the hunger of the world outside these walls. But then, his voice steady and resonant, he delivered the truth he had finally embraced. Wisdom is learning to leave the tables where respect is no longer served. He didn't just walk away. He reached into his jacket and pulled out the other folder he had prepared. He laid out the evidence of the forged signatures and the dangerous alloy substitutions Julian had authorized. The air in the room shifted instantly. The board members, terrified of legal liability, began to murmur and shift in their chairs. Elias watched the color drain from Julian's face as the predator realized he had finally become the prey. Julian tried to interrupt, to spin a web of lies about technical oversights, but the evidence was irrefutable. Elias had documented every discrepancy and forged initial. He had stripped the mask from the mentor who had tried to bury him under the weight of his own creation. Without waiting for a response, Elias unbuckled the gold watch and placed it on the table next to his keycard. It was a silent declaration that he no longer needed the validation of ghosts or the permission of tyrants. He turned his back on the prestige and walked out of the boardroom for the last time. The heavy doors clicked shut behind him, echoing through the hallway like a final gavel. The fallout was swift. The scandal tore through Vanguard Heights, leading to lawsuits and the collapse of Julian's empire. But Elias didn't stay to watch the ruins. He moved to a small, sun-drenched studio in a quiet corner of the city. There were no marble floors, just the scent of cedar and the scratching of his pencil on paper. He began taking on modest projects for those who valued integrity over vanity. One evening, Elias sat around a simple wooden table in his studio. Elena was there, along with a few colleagues who had followed him. The meal was modest, the laughter was genuine, and the respect was palpable. There was no hierarchy here, only the shared joy of creation and the warmth of companionship. Elias looked at his hands, stained with graphite and calloused from honest work. He was finally building something for himself, not for a master who viewed him as a tool. On his desk lay a contract for a community center. He picked up his pen and signed his name, just his name. He had left the wrong table to find the right path, and he was finally home.